Hi, my name is Hannah, and today we will interview Patrick. Based in Indonesia, he is a former college professor who moved from the US where he lived for 29 years to run an agriculture business. Today, he gives us his view on key trends as we emerge into a post-pandemic world.
This podcast channel is about you, successful international entrepreneurs, successful expats, successful investors. Sponsored by HTJ JUNTAK.
JUNTAK, how are you today, sir?
I am well, Derren.
Long time no see. Good to see you. So for those who may be watching this video or who may be listening to the podcast, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Patrick Simanjuntak. I live here in Jakarta, and I run an avocado farm. Also, basically run as an agribusiness. Now, I basically inherited from my father. I wasn't really trained as a farmer, but I've learned it more than enough. So definitely a lot more than 4 years ago. But
Great.
prior to this, I was in the U.S. for the United States for 29 years. I was in different states since I was small. High school, college, work. I was also a professor over there. By training, I'm an engineer and a mathematician. And I switched gears. I ended up teaching in academia, in finance. And when I know my father was somewhat old, so well, if I don't go back home, who's going to take over it? And the family business may collapse, which is one of the downsides, or should I say typical downsides of family-run business. You got to have some kind of, lineage, right? If no one's competed, a lot of time family-run business, just go bye-bye.
Yeah.
So I spend most of my weekends at the farm, and I spend my weekdays at the farm, and my weekends here in Jakarta.
Okay, gotcha. My sister is actually an engineer as well, and I think perhaps you'd agree. She says, and I have observed that engineers tend to be very logical. So whatever the task is, an engineer has an ability to break it down into its logical constituent parts and just figure it out and make it work. So I think that perhaps would help explain your ability to switch disciplines, because you have a very logical way of looking at things. That's just a perspective. But as I was sharing with you before we started recording, I've been having conversations with people from all parts of the world. I mean, we've spoken to people in obviously the US, in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Western Europe, UK, Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well, all parts of Asia, and people from all different geographies and people who do different lines of work. But agriculture is obviously very important, if not the most important line of work as far as I'm concerned. So I think that gives you a different perspective, and I'm keen to hear from you. So basically, as we're saying, the topic is the post-pandemic world. What trends do you see that we need to pay attention to from your perspective as we enter this whole post-pandemic world?
Okay. Just kind of a background. Industries, you have a high-tech industry, you have a middle level or middle tech industry, and you have a low tech industry. So in this pandemic, the ones that are thriving and doing well and almost unaffected is the high tech and the low tech. Okay, so what I mean by high tech, well, they're using Zoom, and their stock price went up by 200%. Google's keep on continuing to go up. So a lot of the IT, because you have all this work from home and all that, they're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now the low-tech industry, or also known as the basic industries, such as food, water, medical, they're thriving.
Yeah.
So in our case,
Mm-hmm.
We are in the agribusiness. Yes, we mainly have in avocados. We focus mainly on the health foods. You have to understand, when it comes to agribusiness, to say that agribusiness is not affected, that's not necessarily true. If you look at the United States, you have a lot of farms that are affected. But again, when it comes to agribusiness, yes, food is essential, but what kind of food? So even if you're at home, well, you do want to stay healthy. You don't want to be infected with COVID. So if anything, you want to strengthen your body immunity. So the health foods are growing. The organics are growing. If you look at Beyond Meat, look at all these companies that have recently IPO'd in America that focus on health foods, their stocks are going up. So even here in Indonesia, you have so many industries that are affected, and they're dropping in terms of export or import. But of all the industries, export of foods from Indonesia is growing, and even the president is pushing for more higher productivity and more work on increasing food production. Mm-hmm. And in countries such as Indonesia or Southeast Asia, even in parts of Asia, food is becoming, the demand, the people are growing, so the demand for food is increasing. At the same time, their GDPs, their income per capita is increasing. So yes, they're eating more, but what kind of food are they? You see what I'm saying? So just because you're richer and you used to eat ramen, I don't think you want to eat more ramen. Yeah. You want to eat steak now, So going forward, it is important, for example, obviously, for many years, not many people think about, what happens with the pandemic. Well, I think different industries will start thinking in terms of, how can I make it more, not just financially proof, but also more, what happens pandemic proof. I think more companies will think in terms of a black swan possibility. Mm-hmm. They're going to have contingency plans, and I think that's how. But I cannot say for sure how each company will do it. But I think this is actually a good incubation period where more companies are definitely seeking out on how to adjust it. Such as, for example, as you mentioned earlier, more and more companies they're trying to cut costs, and they've cut down on offices. Hey, why do I need 5 locations in the world if 1 is enough or 2 is enough?
Yeah. So essentially, yes, the general trends like, as you said, technology, and the technology firms obviously doing very well, as well, I guess, as like biotech or pharmaceutical companies. But in terms of food, there's a consciousness and a sensitivity to health, and therefore healthy living and healthy eating is going to be something people perhaps pay more attention to as we maintain our immune systems, and therefore that's a niche that can only go up, which is healthy foods, and including fruits like avocados, for example. So there's definitely an opportunity there. But what at the same time, my perspective, and tell me if, because you're closer to this than me, that somehow, not somehow, because of the laws of economics and trade or whatever, unhealthy foods tend to be cheaper than healthy foods for whatever reason. And if it is that on the back of this we're seeing an economic downturn, then even though people would be more sensitive to health, to some extent they need to balance it with the reality that they have lower disposable incomes, and maybe they won't be able to afford to pay for healthier foods. How do you see that dynamic playing out between, economic restrictions as well, combined, coming together with the demand for healthier foods, which tend to be more expensive?
That's a great question,
Mhm.
and the answer might surprise you. So what happened is this: you are correct in a way,
Mhm.
okay, but what happened is that in a rising economy, including Indonesia, again, this is based on our experience in the past, okay. If indeed economy becomes worse, then well, what that means they're going to cut down on travel. They're not going to cut down on food. I mean, on buying cars, buying house. So big ticket purchase items, they're going to cut down to the point where, yes, that means you're living in an austere, you're using austerity measures. So at the same time, once in a while, you want to indulge a little bit. And a lot of times, well, something that costs not too much but still indulge yourself is eating. so what happened even in Indonesia, if you notice, people still eat out. Wait a minute, isn't there supposed to be a pandemic? Isn't there supposed to be an economic downturn? People are still eating. So, and the other thing as well was that during the Asian financial crisis in 1997, when things was really, really bad, did not see a drop whatsoever in demand for as long as you can provide high quality fruits, no drop whatsoever.
I see.
Whether it be the 1997, back in 2008, or even the paper tantrum of 2013, we did not see a drop whatsoever. Even right now, demand is actually shooting up.
Oh.
So we have no problem selling. The problem is not the selling. The problem is actually the inputs. So trying to get fertilizer, spare parts for what they call farm equipment or things breaking down. Well, sometimes the stores are not open, so we can call them up, or even the factories are not open, so we cannot get spare parts. So let's say if you want to get spare parts from overseas, from America, well, we can't get them. So it's more a problem from the incoming, not so much the outgoing. So we don't see so much of a drop going forward. Number one, if anything, if people is going to cut down on so many things, food is one of the things that people indulge in some in food. It's comfort food.
Okay. So what is your products? They go to what is your mix between the domestic market and export?
We are still, it's a family farm. We're not that big. We're only about 20 hectares. We only have 2,300 trees, about 50 acres. So even Jakarta demand, we cannot. So we're still starting small. We have big aspiration. Hey, Sunkist started out with only 30 hectares, right?
Yeah.
now they're a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
So we have that aspiration, obviously, because up till today, in Indonesia, I don't think there's a Dole of Indonesia or a Sunkist of Indonesia, or along those lines, Chiquita of Indonesia. I don't think there's something that's professional from an agribusiness that specializes in fruits, especially in higher quality fruits, because for the majority of the times, if it's fruits produced in Asia, there's a lack of quality standards, right? The taste is different. So we're trying to fix that, and we do provide quality, and that's basically where we maintain our business, because they can expect high quality stuff from us, and they can expect the taste is standardized. That's the main biggest thing, I think, in Indonesia. But as it moves forward, because right now Indonesia was categorized as low, medium income country. Now it's like higher, medium income country in terms of GDP. It may change the pace, and I think going forward, in our case, I think people demand for healthy foods will increase because people want to stay healthy, and people are living longer as well here in Indonesia. I think they just want to go eating junk food all the time.
Okay, that's a fair point. So what's your outlook for, let's say, the Indonesian economy? What are your thoughts?
With Indonesia, the problem is it's kind of when you read, how do I say, the macro, all the governmental information is output. The question is, because there's such a huge informal economy in Indonesia here, we don't necessarily know if those numbers are believable, and that's the problem. So if you're talking about macro, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, because the numbers are, I don't know how much believable they are, number one. But strictly on agribusiness point of view, especially from personal impact on our business, I think it's going to grow. It's just going to continue because the population continues to grow.
Sure. Yeah.
And as incomes level increases, well, there's a high correlation between higher income, higher consumption of food. It's just common sense.
But let me stop you there. I'm wondering, would incomes continue to grow to the extent that Indonesia, the economy, is driven by commodity exports? And commodity exports, be it palm oil or gold or gas or oil, those commodity prices are a bit weak right now. And to the extent that the weaker commodity exports, wouldn't you see some deflationary pressure on prices and on the economy?
You are correct. If we read the news, there is a drop in exports from Indonesia, which is true.
Okay.
However, the imports are dropping a lot more. Therefore, Indonesia is running export trade account plus surplus, so that actually strengthens the rupiah.
Right. Okay.
So yes, I agree. The exports are dropping, true, but the imports is dropping a lot more. So that actually strengthens the currency. So it makes it look like the economy is doing well, which is kind of, it's like you lost income, right? It's like an individual. Well, I got a 20% cut in my salary, but my living expenses dropped by 50%. Well, technically, that guy just got a raise.
Wow. Yeah.
You follow me? So it's very unclear how will this play out. Now, in the short term, it seems to be fine. Long term, I don't know what to tell you. So again, when we start mentioning, well, how about this export, long term, obviously that's not going to be good. But short term, it seems to be pretty stable so far, and it doesn't. And I don't think Indonesia is predicted to be negative growth this year. I don't think it's even going to. They claim Indonesia will not enter a recession, because the definition of recession is 2 quarters of negative growth. But so far, Indonesia has not clocked any negative growth yet.
Wow. Okay.
But then again, can I believe those numbers? Is that just the formal numbers, or is it the informal numbers? Because so much of the Indonesian economy is informal economy, and I don't know how they measure that. And I don't know how believable those numbers are.
Okay. That's a fair point. And what about Asia in general? What are your views on Asia in general?
Asia in general, to be honest with you, because over the years it has gone through a lot of ups and downs, tends to be more resilient. And I think the experience of 1997 was a great teacher for all of Asia to become resilient when bad times come. That was the reason why in 2007, 2008, even though the U.S. mortgage collapse was very bad in the U.S., but he was just chugging along in Asia, right? So I'm guessing even right now, I think it will be resilient. Of course, there'll be some pain here and there, but I don't think it's going to drop like having riots or something extreme like that. I don't think so, because a lot of the countries are also heavily providing a lot of stimulus, right? A lot of like financial transfers and that. So I think it will still be resilient, because again, by nature, a lot of Asians tend to have much higher savings rate than in the West. Yeah. So during downtimes, they can withdraw from those savings. Of course, short term it's fine, or even medical. Of course, nothing solves anything that's long term. Yeah. I don't think this is going to last for long term.
Okay, all right, that's great. You know, that's a really good perspective, and I think that's a great takeaway. because when I speak to people in terms of where the opportunities are right now, everyone is like, they're chasing tech stocks, they're chasing pharmaceuticals, but they forget one of the more obvious things, healthy food. Healthy food. And yeah, you're right. When we've seen what Impossible has done and other similar companies, it does speak to a shift, and a shift that started actually before this pandemic. And to that extent, I can see what you're saying, which is that the pandemic would actually accelerate that shift towards a more healthy mindset and healthy eating, relatively speaking. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.